you'll be aware that, as in that in recent years, we've from October 2000, the Human Rights Act came into force in the UK, incorporating the European Convention on Human Rights into UK law and giving British citizens specific legal rights. For the first time in one sense, but of course many of those basic rights were rights that have been taken for granted as the legal system in the UK has evolved over the centuries. So, for example, fundamental rights like freedom of association or freedom from torture, the right to life, are things that the British citizen, I think, has taken for granted for many centuries, rather than requiring the Human Rights Act to enforce. But as journalists, there are 3 articles of the Human Rights Act, of the European Convention on Human Rights, which are of particular interest to us and which do affect what we write every day. We've touched on a couple of them already. Article 6, for example, is the right to a fair trial. That's nothing new in British law. It's a principle, if you like, that pretty much dates back to the Magna Carta in its earliest form, as we evolved a system of balancing the power of the Crown against the rights of individuals not to be subject to arbitrary justice by the King or Queen, and to instead have access to a court of law and the ruling of their peers. But that's a pretty important right, as is one that is slightly less well established in British journalistic history, which is Article 8, the right to respect for private and family life. Both of these articles, which protect individuals' rights, are balanced against what you might call the journalist's article, Article 10, the right to freedom of expression. And it's fair to say that Article 10 is a very, very powerful freedom, and it's one that has been staunchly defended all the way through to the European Court of Human Rights. Although there's a recognition that balancing those rights isn't an easy task. If you even just take a couple, perhaps, talking about their relationship, one person's right to privacy will perhaps conflict directly with the other person's right to freedom of expression. And those are things that, since 2000, the British courts have been increasingly asked to balance in individual cases the law. To what extent is somebody's right to freedom of expression impinging on somebody else's right to privacy? Traditionally, the Strasbourg Court of Human Rights has been very media friendly. It's repeatedly stated that the press is a crucial element in a democratic society, and there have been numerous judgments in the support of press freedom of expression, both in the European and in the higher British courts. While we're speaking about the law, if you like, in addition to legal restrictions, we've also got a number of codes of conduct which encourage or enforce ethical standards in the media. You'll be aware perhaps of the Press Complaints Commission's Code of Practice, which is a form of voluntary self-regulation of the print media, and which gives advice on a number of different issues in situations where perhaps the law doesn't give absolute guidance in black or white terms. The PCC code basically tells journalists how to handle a range of particular issues and what we shouldn't do under normal circumstances, although in many cases there are exceptions when journalists can show that it's demonstrably in the public interest for journalists to detect or expose crime, to protect public health and safety, or prevent the public being misled, for example. So, there'll be clauses in the PCC code, which say that generally speaking we will not indulge in misrepresentation or subterfuge, for example, that we won't pretend to be something we're not. We'll declare ourselves as journalists and so on. But obviously there may also be circumstances where filming undercover or carrying out an investigative report might require breaking that normal ethical guideline, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to expose wrongdoing in a particular circumstance. So, just to get us kick-started then, as a writer, when should alarm bells start ringing on the story that you're tackling? And here are a couple of the most common pitfalls. And just as we go into those, now's a good time, I think, to invite you to raise any sort of particular questions that you've got about different areas of the law that we might have touched on. So, where are the common pitfalls? Crime stories. Well, we've already said, watching out for an arrest. You need to take care not to prejudice a trial after somebody's been arrested, and that could extend to photography, for example, if identity is an issue in a particular case. If there's going to be a lineup, an identification lineup. Court stories. Obviously, before and during a trial, court reporters need to know the laws of contempt to ensure they don't prejudice the trial, and they also need to know about specific restrictions that may apply in different cases. Children in court, there are particular restrictions on identifying children in certain court cases, and there are times when they can be identified. So if you're a reporter covering the courts, you obviously need to know those aspects of the law in quite a lot of detail. Victims of sex offences. Victims of many sex offences have lifelong anonymity under the law, and that's not something that journalists disagree with. It's our duty to protect individuals, and we therefore need to be careful not to inadvertently identify them. But of course that's not just relevant to covering a court case which involves a sex offence. It might be that you're carrying out interviews relating to sex offences or to a victim of sex offence and need to know how you stand there. Thank you, Claire. Yes, you were sending through a useful little link there about the Press Complaints Commission. And the nice thing about their website, if any of you are interested, is that as well as giving details of the code, which is a fairly short document with a series of very succinct clauses saying what we shouldn't do under normal circumstances, it's also got a rundown of adjudication so that you can see where the PCC's been asked to adjudicate or to rule in certain controversial cases. All the details of that are on the site as well, and some of those cases are quite handy in sort of putting those difficult dilemmas, opening those up to wider debate, if you like, because obviously it's not always simple to know when you look at a particular scenario if something is a specific problem or not. Just picking up Gilly's earlier question.